Good morning, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Sarah is going to make sure the technology is behaving for us today, so we'll get that squared away, and all I have to do is hit the return button. So. There you go. Yeah, thank you. I, too, would like to follow in the footsteps of our opening speaker and the minister in paying my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, as well as extend my respect to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues that might be here with us in the audience today. As Amy mentioned, we at Casey Family Programs, we have been providing foster care services since 1966, and at one point in time, 23 offices across the United States. And as part of that work, we partnered with 3 American Indian tribal nations and ran offices with staff hired from those local communities for a number of years, and then gave the office buildings and the program back to the tribes, transferred it to the tribal nations, because at one point in time they had the infrastructure and the need, and we thought it's time. And now they run each of those tribal nations. They run those offices and provide those services to their children and families, primarily foster care, but some family support services. So today, I'm going to briefly take us through some of the origins of a little bit about what you folks have been adapting and customizing for Australia, just so you have a little bit of a context here. And it's unfortunate the minister had such a packed schedule, because she might have been pleased that this technology actually originates out of healthcare and healthcare improvement. So we all shamelessly stole it. Actually, they were given to us and through a consultation contract from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement back on the East Coast. And then they had successfully used it in a variety of healthcare settings. So we shouldn't be afraid in our field of going after technology and strategies in other fields. Susan Collins, we were talking just the other day about how there are a number of wonderful principles, values, and strategies out of developmental disabilities that should be guiding. In fact, in many respects, do guide child welfare, right? One of them being placement in the least restrictive environment, a core principle for anybody who works in developmental disability. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to talk about the larger context for child welfare only very quickly, just to sort of call out a new framework that you have for child safety in Australia that I was really impressed with. We're going to dig into a little bit of what are some of the fundamental principles that the Breakthrough Series draws on from Charles Deming, the Japanese Kaizen, continuous quality improvement movement, just so you have a grounding that this just didn't spring up out of nowhere. There's some pretty deep work in business and industry around continuous quality improvement that this is based on. And then really get into, just a really quick review of the strategies and processes that were used by the partner agencies to do these innovations, which I'm very impressed with. Sometimes the most powerful things in our field, when you look at them, you go, well, that's not rocket science, that's just common sense. But it's the way it's packaged and how thoughtfully your youth in care, your foster parents, your agency line staff team together with the University of Sydney project staff to pull this together. That is a set of tools much greater than its individual parts. And so when I look at those 5-6 strategies and I see these beautiful fact sheets that are going to be coming out soon, these practice sheets, those are some really nice materials that I'm going to be, when they're available, I'm going to take them back and we're going to put them through all our offices. And we, like Amy said, we work in all 50 states, so I'm going to be just sending those out to some of our staff, because I think our line child welfare staff and our foster parents and our birth parents deserve that kind of thoughtful work. So hats off to you. So we're going to talk about how you got there in terms of what was the underpinnings of that, because I know there's been some new staff coming in as usual in child welfare. So the team wanted me to sort of cover some of that. So let's do that. Larger context for child welfare, I think this work, actually I was really pleased to hear the minister's remarks. I think she really nailed some of the core principles and values that I know guide your work. And it's great when someone in government also says that as well. So just for your own reference, I put in here some of the same principles that I think permeate your work. And so I'm not going to belabor those, but the whole notion of what the minister said I thought was just spot on. So I'm not going to take our time on that. There is a table in your handout and in these PowerPoint slides where I took your latest Australian National Framework for Protecting Children, the one that just came out, and I aligned it on the left side with its key principles or focus areas. And then if you were just curious about, well, what's going on in the United States that's complementary to this, I've given you some highlights on some very new national legislation that just got passed about a year or two ago. That's called the Family First legislation that we have. And for the first time, the United States is a little backwards. We don't have some of the social welfare programs that you have and the more robust health care and housing programs that you have, or a little more conservative that way and not as enlightened, not as progressive. But that act, for the first time, guarantees funding to prevent families from having to experience child welfare. So we are having now a new dedicated, uncapped funding stream to keep families together. And for us, that's a big deal. And we have now a funding stream to keep families in whole family substance abuse treatment, where mom and dad and the children go into the treatment together. And for the first time, we have a dedicated funding stream for post-permanency services, an area of practice science that we don't have very much well developed in many countries, which is once the child is restored with a family or is in a guardianship family or is adopted, where's the supports for those people? What happens when the person who was adopted at 4 is now 12 and 15 and just hits a rough patch in their development? You want to have those services available. So I think this may be maybe a new area, or maybe the next piece of work that maybe the project team might take on with you all. And I would salute you if you did take that on, because family restoration and post-permanency services are areas in our field that our practice science is not very well developed. So if you take that on, that's fantastic. So anyways, in there, I just went through some of the focus areas and principles and said, oh my gosh, that's some of what the United States and a lot of other countries are also struggling with and trying to do. So I wanted to say, hey, you're in really great company, and in some areas, Australia is always sort of a step ahead with some of your thinking in that. And so I wanted to make sure you had that as a reference. I don't want to belabor that because that's something you can read on your own, and it just reinforces what you've got going. So let's talk about continuous quality improvement, which is at the heart of what is a breakthrough series piece of strategy, and it's important because there's some key principles that maybe you've reviewed quickly. Hopefully, you certainly lived them as you did the work. But it's sometimes nice to call that out, because if someone says, well, what is this stuff that you guys did, breakthrough series, and what underpins it, and why is it such good science? And you go, well, there is a science behind that. And it's a number of years of science that comes out of business and industry. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those examples in a minute here. But part of that principle is that child welfare and a lot of other human services has to move beyond a compliance-focused approach to quality assurance. Because if all we're doing is ticking boxes, did this get done, did that get done, did this get done, you miss a big issue, right? Which is quality, culture, relationships. Some of the most important pieces sometimes can get overlooked if you're just too focused on did a box get checked, did a certain component get done or not. So that's at the heart of what a new or what a very good approach to continuous quality improvement would tell you. And I don't get this just out of human services. This is where this work came out of business and industry. You remember when the first batch of cars, when we had the first oil crisis and everybody went to these very lightweight, small cars, and a number of those cars, the paint peeled, the cars fell apart, they didn't run well? Well, the Japanese car manufacturers took notice of that. And they put in place a Kaizen, a process Kaizen. They put in place a continuous quality improvement process that focused on hundreds of small improvements that could be practically made. And they honored their factory line workers for noting when they could improve something. And they celebrated the line staff on the factory floor when they came up with a good idea. And is the rest history? Who had some of the best well-made cars very quickly in the 70s? Yeah, a few of the cars had paint peeling. I had a Honda Toyota that had that. But the Japanese quickly demonstrated a knack for quality, and many of us drove Japanese cars that got very good gas mileage because of that. So that's an example of a focus on continuous quality improvement, and those techniques, William Deming and a number of other folks studied the Japanese approach and other approaches for how to do that. And that's at the heart of this. Sometimes small tests of change get you much farther along than if you wait 5 years and try to go for the big bang strategy. Our field doesn't operate very well like that. Occasionally we've had breakthroughs. The Oregon Permanency Planning Project, Family Finding with Kevin Campbell, Family Preservation Services that focuses on in-home services, CPS helplines that are based in the community, not the hotlines. Some of those are some of our sort of big breakthrough. Subsidized guardianship, which is fast becoming one of our largest areas of permanency planning, not behind, it's still way behind family restoration, and then there's adoption, but subsidized guardianship where a relative is paid a little bit of a sum of money to help care for a cousin or a nephew or a grandson or a granddaughter is vast. These are sort of the breakthroughs. But a lot of our best work has happened slowly. So anyways, that's some of what underpins this work. Now the famous diagram that you might have seen in different variations on the project. And at the heart of this work is what's called a plan, do, check, act cycle, or PDSA, the PDSA cycle. And that's you plan and you innovate and you try to identify an innovation. You actually start to implement it. You study how it's doing and then you refine it. That's the study part, and then the act is the refining it, and then you start the cycle all over again. Again, not rocket science, but again, it's a very good, simple strategy that when followed well, will get you improvements over time in a really good way, and that's why that's at the heart of the Breakthrough Series, and we'll refer to that back again. And sometimes, this is another example, these are a little linear, and I think some of us are not linear thinkers, and in fact, the process sometimes we'll skip a beat and you'll go and check on something and you'll go back and redesign it. So I don't want to say, we want to be careful about not being too rigid with these kinds of frameworks and cycles, but just to get the basics down, they do come out sort of linear here. And so this was an aspect of a breakthrough series that focused on data collection and how do you help staff get the right notes after seeing a family in the case record in a way that communicates well. By the way, there's a whole science emerging in medicine all about information handoffs. That's another area in child welfare. How often does critical information not get communicated well between the CPS worker, the in-home services worker, and the foster care worker? So in medicine, areas of medicine, they have focused on a science of information handoffs. How do you make sure that gets done well? That's an area I got to do some reading on. I learned it about a year ago. But it's an example of how you might pay attention to how things get dictated, how they get recorded, the format they get recorded in, and what's important. And we've been studying with the University of Tennessee and a bunch of child welfare public agencies. We've been studying child deaths and child severe injuries for children who were being investigated by Child Protective Services because we're trying to learn what went right to protect those children and what went wrong. And as part of that, we're learning that this science of information handoffs is really important to focus on because sometimes critical information doesn't make it to the next worker and then tragedies happen. And so that's an example of something out of medicine. That's a continuous quality improvement piece that they've studied a lot that maybe in child welfare we are starting to take a look at that. So I got a lot to learn there, but that's an example of that. Here's another example of where the iterative nature, how in steps you try to innovate. In this case, it focused on clerical staff and how the line workers were interacting with the clerical staff to make sure the right case record notes got recorded. And so they did a form of what we were talking about the other day called business process mapping. Again, out of business industry operations research. Business process mapping is an approach where you really take a look at each micro step in your process to find out what's going right and where are those glitches? Where are things getting hung up? Where is a form really getting in the way? And if you really redesign that form or that particular part of the process, it would go much smoother. Thank you, Amy. So that's an example, and this is how they were making iterative improvements all the way through. I love this kind of work because if you get the teamwork going well, it can be a real forward-thinking process. You just got to stop and pause every once in a while and celebrate what you've got doing. Celebrate a good idea. Celebrate when someone, a parent or an alumnus in care says, you know, I think I've got an idea for how to make that better. We don't do enough celebration in our field, and I think this can be a way to say every step along the way, let's acknowledge what we're doing right and maybe how we can make it better. So some of the other underlying principles that I think you might have touched on was, use all the information you can. Data and measurement is not an end out of itself, because sometimes if the researchers, if you don't rein us in, that's all we'll do is we'll focus on research and the data collection and we'll lose the big picture. And the big picture is we're collecting information for feedback, right? We're collecting information to learn together about what's working and what is not working. It's not to hold up and make sacrosanct the dashboard. The dashboard is a means to an end. It's a learning tool, and that's part of that principle there. And the whole notion of let's not get defensive. Almost everything we do can be improved in our field, even though we really do a lot of good things well. Let's not get too defensive because we probably can find new ways of doing things, and that's really, really great. You've probably heard Amy and the team and some of the sponsor leaders, organizations talk about the importance of stakeholders. So I'm just going to pause for a second and say that the idea of stakeholders and who we involve as stakeholders and when we involve them is changing in our field. And that's making some folks a little uncomfortable, at least I'll speak for in the United States, because we're really making a push for people with lived expertise. Amy, you mentioned, I get it wrong each time. Experts by experience, which I love that term. In our projects, we have a name, they're called Constituent Consultants. They're paid for their time. They have definitive specific roles, and their input is highly valued. So increasingly in our field, we should be having people with lived expertise, foster parents, birth parents, alumni of foster care, involved in the upfront planning of projects all the way through to the end when we're looking at our data, and that's what we did in our alumni studies in 2005. And then the foster care alumni came out with me to brief our government officials. So they not only helped me design the questionnaires, they helped me make sense of the data, what's the story behind the data, and then they helped us present the findings side by side, equal partners, because sometimes their voice oftentimes was the more powerful voice in the room, as they've got the experience and they know how to interpret that data in a way that myself as a researcher, I just couldn't do, and my colleagues couldn't do as well. So when we talk about stakeholders, I think that's shifting a little bit, but that means we've got to have definitive roles for those stakeholders on the projects, and we've got to have money to pay them, to honor their time, and we've got to have sometimes extra time in our projects, because to do this work well takes extra time, right? Because you got to orient people, discussions have to happen. It's not as efficient of a process as maybe we would have liked. This is another way of depicting a CQI framework. I won't get into the details, it's just in the interest of time, but it's a whole notion of a PDSA cycle again, but It's acknowledging that the work we do is within organizations, communities, and cultures. And so that why is sometimes the work so complicated and difficult? It's because we might have a piece of organizational culture holding us back, or a piece of organizational culture propelling us forward, because the leader of our organization is a visionary and they want some kind of change to happen. So they become a force for change, whereas some aspects of the community or some political aspects might want to hold us back. So it's paying attention to these sort of influences, what we might call systems influences, is what I like about this diagram. A couple more of the framework components, then we'll move into the breakthrough series and then make sure we got some time for questions. Part of it is, you just saw that diagram, that any kind of CQI process takes place within an organization, increasingly right, within a community, within a context. So within a culture, we need to be thoughtful about that. What the agency has as its specific outcome targets can be a really important influence and helps affect what we can do and what we can't do. So that's an important piece there, along with whatever accreditation standards they operate under. Do you have accreditation of voluntary agencies here in Australia, right? So there's an example. We're accredited at Casey Family Programs. We go through COA. It's the Child Welfare League of America affiliate organization. A number of you probably have your national accrediting bodies. So that's important. And then it's making sure that you're, from line staff, your leaders, everybody is grounded in those CQI principles if you want to make sure that what you're doing, takes hold. So those are just some of the things here that I think you work through a little bit. Again, acknowledging that you've got both qualitative and quantitative data that you're pulling in as part of the breakthrough series process. That's exactly what a good CQI process in business and industry has done. How many people have ever seen a fishbone diagram? Yes, you've never seen a fishbone? Okay, it's that classic way you unpack a problem. That's a very it can be quantitative, but it's a very qualitative way where you say, we're not getting enough foster parents for teenagers. Let's unpack why that's happening. Is it how we're presenting our foster care program? Is it who we're communicating with? Is it how we're communicating? Are we using our own foster parents as primary recruitment vehicles? Because in fact, the research tells you that's one of the most effective ways you can do that. So it's a fishbone diagram is a systematic process that the CQI experts say, let's unpack that problem and look at what's driving it in all the different ways it being driven. That's an example of qualitative with some quantitative data that can be brought to bear, and that's an example of a tool, a CQI tool that people have used. And those are some of the principles that we've already covered a bit. Amy, should I stop just at the end of the presentation, or do you want me to take questions now? What would you like? I'm just watching my time. I can stop here for a second. We're going to dive into some of the breakthrough series principles that are much more like, well, where do you take this and what does a breakthrough series have as its framework? But I wanted to stop here for just a second, see if there are any questions on any of the, oh boy, I'm not going to mess this up, any of the components that I might have talked about or anything on the diagrams that I've covered so far. Does anyone have a question or comment on that? So we can stop for that. I know you might, yes, go ahead, Susan.
Just occurred to me that the fishbone diagram you mentioned, that process would be really useful at that plan part of the cycle, Peter. Did any of the work cases done, have you used that at that starting point to identify the problem for people?
We have. Anybody heard that phrase, ready, fire, aim? Ready, fire, aim? I don't like the war analogy piece of it, but consider you're shooting clay things, not real things, animals. But what I love about that process and that piece of continuous quality improvement is it encourages us to pause, to think deeply, to pull in our stakeholders, and to really unpack what the problem is. Because in unpacking the problem, some of our best solutions will emerge, and occasionally in our field, often we don't give ourselves time and space to think deeply about problems. We're always in a crisis mode. What's the next thing I got to solve? And then, you know, some of us are problem solvers instead of listeners. And that's what I love about that aspect of CQI. It slows us down and it says, what's really going on here? And that's the fishbone. You're right. That's the value of it, I think, is taking that time to really unpack things. Because I think some of our best solutions come out in that problem identification phase. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's a great example. Other questions? Yes?
I love
Billy.
seeing in your stakeholders, children right at the top of that list. And I was wondering how you found convincing other people to see children as sort of the primary stakeholders, or sort of, you know, members of their own world, their own care team.
As researchers or as administrators, you got to be careful because there are ethics and human subject safeguards. So in most of my work now, I start with youth that are age 18 and older because of the complexities and challenges involved with interviewing and talking with younger children. But we have done studies with, and that's a lot of listening. It's interviews, it's focus groups. And we found that bringing in those powerful quotes, or Sixto Cancel just did an amazing expose of residential treatment group care in the United States. And Sixto Cancel is a foster care alumnus, a survivor of some of the institutions himself. But they used poems, stories, and pictures along with the quotes to make a very powerful report. That's making its way in the national news. And Paris Hilton came out because she's a survivor of one of those camps, one of the ranches in Utah where she was mistreated. And so that was a great example of the power and the voice, and how some people, the way they want to communicate is through a poem or a story or a picture that they've drawn or a photograph they've taken. And the Think of Us report is now making its way around the world, but mainly the United States. So that's an example of that. But from a human subject's point of view, and so we can pay them for their time, we've been focusing on young adults, age 18 and up, and that's been our primary area. But I agree with you. Sometimes it's the focus groups or the interviews, or the interviews where there's a trusted caregiver with that young person to support them. Those are some of the most powerful visions we can do. So, yeah, very good. You know, because sometimes the people we need to influence are our politicians. And a good story from a person with lived expertise sometimes can move a politician in a way that a report or a two-page handout just won't do. So that's where I think of the value of that. Because as a researcher, I want my work to be used. I want it to make for change. So one of the things we've been trying to work on is then after we do all this wonderful work, how do we get it used? How do we make it have a difference, make a difference in the world? And that's what we learned in 2005 with having the alumni fly to Washington, D.C. with us and walk the hallways of the Capitol and talk with legislators. It was that way. So, okay, so let's get into the breakthrough series, because I want to make sure we've got a little time and we end on time. So the work you did, maybe you cover this, but you forgot it, but just to revisit it again, this work goes back to like 1995. This came out of healthcare because the healthcare field was really struggling around the world. People were dying. There were operating room accidents. The folks might have remembered a pretty famous book that was called The Quality Chasm. The Quality Chasm, and it was where medical authors were writing and saying, we have got a major problem in our healthcare industry, and we're not paying attention enough to patient care. We're not paying enough attention to quality. And that's where some of this came about. And then this institute out of Boston said, hey, let's develop some strategies for how to make these things better. And they went gangbusters and did a bunch of you can see it there. How many people remember, and it's probably still a concern in a number of countries, too many women were being coerced into having cesareans, what we call C-sections. The timing, the docs weren't handling it well, the midwives were not trained properly. That was an example. We had people having all kinds of mishaps in the emergency room. We were having patients being given the wrong medication. There were people who were supposed to get oxygen that got another gas through a hose. You know how they fixed that out? You know how they figured that out? They made the nozzles 2 different shapes. So they made a physical. They said, oh, we're not going to train the staff. This is too important. We're going to physically change the design so you can't put an oxygen hose in the same connector as you can whatever other gas it was. So it was all that was coming in, that was churning in the medical field, and that's where some of this stuff came from. So I loved it. We caught on as an operating foundation. We said, oh, this is practical. We work with public and voluntary child welfare agencies. They want to improve their services. You guys might be onto something here, and that's what back in 2000, we started doing that. So this comes from a long, good history of what you've adopted and adapted here for Australia. Has a really nice, very well-respected roots in healthcare improvement, which is good. What I love about it also, so when Amy and her colleagues came calling, I said, oh, sure, we'll share what we knew, is because we had good experiences with it. We had teams from various states to come together on and I'll go over those, a whole bunch of different topic areas, and we would pull in juvenile court judges, legislators, foster parents, foster care alumni, line staff, supervisors, very important staff member to always have, and then directors. So we had this whole motley crew of excellent people to work on things, again, depending on what that state wanted to send for their Breakthrough Series team. So we loved the team-based aspect of it and the fact that they were mixing people of different positions and agencies together. So that was really good. Modest, but ambitious at the same time, in the sense that we said you don't have to do rocket science. It's just small tests of change. That's the phrase. Small but meaningful tests of change. And that was exciting for us because people could say, well, hey, I can do that. I think we in a team, we can come up with a small test of change here and then go back to our agencies and try it out, see if it works, and then move on to the next test of change or refine that one to make it better. So that was the other piece of it that was attractive to us because we're busy and our public agency colleagues that we're helping, they got crises, they've got kids in care, they got a full plate. So how do you do something that's fairly efficient for innovation, involves teams, which is fun, and gets things done? And that's what was attractive to us when we discovered it. This is more of a theory of change because you have to develop a series of ideas of why you think what you're going to do is going to make a difference. So that's this, and you can look at that later. This is where, again, the BSC stuff refers back to the plan, do, study, act cycles. Plan, do, act, but rapid little cycles of test it out. If it doesn't work, toss it to the side, move on to the next new idea. That's what the whole point was there. Go at something where you've got an urgent problem that you want to unpack and solve, and then come at it by small tests of change until you get some turnaround. That's what the whole point was. Real world stuff. Consensus among the team, frankly, we said, no, you don't have to have everybody on board. Just have enough people to say, this is a good enough idea, we're going to test it out. And let the test be the truth. Don't spend hours and hours and hours debating until every last person on the team is fully in agreement. We went, got to set that consensus building aside. That's going to get in the way. When there's enough people think it's a good enough idea, go try it. Let the real world be the judge and not a set of opinions sitting in a meeting room somewhere, right? That was the pragmatic piece of this. That was really, really great. Along with, again, acknowledging that good ideas come from all over. And sometimes it's your bus driver or your custodian or the foster parent who's been with you for 20 years, who really knows children and how to support them, or a foster care alumnus who understands this because they've been through 10 different homes and they don't want that to happen to anyone else. So ideas come from all over the place, and You see it up there. Steal ideas. It's great if we share ideas in this field. Steal them. Roll with them. People usually feel complimented when you try and use an idea that they had. So we sort of reinforce that. And then we don't do such a good job of this in the field, and we've got to have more government support and time. But this notion of spreading your ideas. If you've got a good idea, then let's get it out there and make sure that whoever developed it has enough time to ally with their key stakeholders to get that out. And usually our projects end when the idea or the report is written. And now what we've got to do is say, nope, there's maybe one or two more phases after that, which is go out and disseminate it widely and then help people try out the new ideas with technical assistance from your team. And we don't often fund those latter two phases, and government and foundations and corporations need to really do that. We really have to talk that up. Otherwise, we've wasted all that time and energy. And then the documents sit on a shelf somewhere. So that is part of what I think is a challenge for all of us right now, is the sustainability, scale up, and then further measurement of that scale up. So, but that's part of it now. This is a table. I love this table. This is your project team put this together, and it just, in a really nice way, summarizes the core aspects of a breakthrough series. So if somebody at your agency wants to know about it, and you know they're a busy person, they're not going to read a bunch of stuff, I highly recommend this out of your report, one of your reports, and the team could probably get this around to you again real easily. This is a really nice piece. Another idea I forgot to mention yesterday, we did a project on ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and Resilience and Protective Factors with some agencies and some communities in Washington State. And at the end, we had a bunch of different products. Well, we created a one-page sheet where we listed every product with hyperlinks to it, because it was an easy way for our audience to then say, oh, you've got a workbook on language. You've got beautiful books written by foster care alumni. You've got these beautiful new practice sheets. We listed them all out with hyperlinks, so someone had one page, one sheet of paper that had everything we had produced over that 3-year project that they could quickly know it was there and then how to get to it. So we had to create a website that was enduring, where I still pay for that website because people keep going back to that sheet. So just another practical example of how do you take this and move it forward. So that I love this summary sheet because it's just really, really done. All right, I'm going to end with, because people asked, well, wait a minute, what areas did you use this in? You guys talk a good game, but did you really use it? Well, boy, did we. And I'm looking back at, this is over 20 years ago we started this. I've been at KC longer than I'm going to tell you, but I say to people I started working at KC when I was 12. But it started with improving health care for children in foster care, because the children's medical, dental, vision, and hearing needs weren't being met very well. So we started there. And then we went, hey, recruitment and retention of caregivers. Recruitment and retention, supporting them so they stay with us, was another breakthrough series. You see that 25 agencies across the country participated in that one, and then we had one American Indian tribe. That changed over time. We have many more American Indian tribes now that we work with. But then there was this thing called Differential Response. New idea, not much known about it, a lot of glitches at first. And it was the whole notion that if a family was referred into a child welfare system, a public child welfare, they would quickly do a risk and safety assessment, and if that family was low risk, they'd divert them. They never even got a CPS investigation necessarily. If the hotline could do it, or an initial assessment worker could go out, the goal was to divert those families to community-based care so they weren't traumatized and stigmatized by public child welfare, which unfortunately, public child welfare has that mantra, has that reputation. So that whole area of how do you fine-tune differential response was another area we worked on. Then Kinship Care, this whole the field started really appreciating the value of placing children informally and licensed in relatives or tribal clan members. So we had a whole breakthrough series on how to fine-tune kinship care. How do you make the right kind of regulations? How do you make licensing exceptions? How do you get felonies expunged or somehow put aside so that a grandparent who had a drunk driving accident at 15 or 17 can now care for their child because of some mistake they made 30 or 40 years ago? You know, why should that prevent them from caring for their grandchild, right? Stupid things that should get put aside. That's some of what they focused on. How do you do a quick safety assessment, but not a full-blown family assessment, so you can place that child not in a shelter home, not in a group home, but directly with an aunt or a grandmother, because the safety issues have been taken care of, but the other licensing things can be done a week from today or 2 weeks from today when the workers and the families got more time. It's those types of innovations that's what they focused on that, frankly, today we're still working on and trying to implement, because we're trying to get our kinship care numbers up from about 38% to 90% in the United States. And we've got some places in Florida and other, they're at 90, 95%. That's a hell of a stretch goal, but that's where, in America, where we're trying to really push ourselves to keep kids with their relatives, or in this case, American Indian clan members, because it's so important. And then, the better our data became in child welfare, the more we discovered we had racial disproportionality. We have too many African American children entering care and staying stuck in care, and we had way too many American Indian children being reported to CPS, placed in care, and languishing in foster care for way too many years. So then we had a breakthrough series on that. That's all they focused on for over a year, was how to reduce that. And I can report to you today that our numbers in foster care in America keep going down. And in a number of places like New York City, and there's some big towns we've had, and some small rural areas, we've reduced foster care by over 50%. And the rates of racial disproportionality have also improved. They've gone down for African American children, but not for our American Indian children. So that's a real problem area that we have, a challenge we have got. We are now mobilizing to do something about, because we're failing our American Indian communities and those families and children. So that was an area back in 2008. My God, that's so many years ago. We're looking at it again now, but that came up, and then finally we did one on timely permanency through family, what you would call family restoration. That became a special breakthrough series. In fact, that's the team we were talking about. Maybe that's the next step for you all here. Would be a fantastic effort if you could focus on family restoration, because that's a great area. Okay, I'm going to close with just how Breakthrough Series provides opportunities. It provides some quiet, safe place to brainstorm. It supports staff and maybe some of your power brokers, like your judges or legislators or whoever you think of as your key stakeholders, to take the time to meet together, to talk together. And in a very busy, crisis-filled world, I think that's a gift we can give, and we should be giving ourselves and our agencies, to have that time, protected, supported time to brainstorm and innovate. And that's why I love this approach, or some variations of it, and I really like the way your products that are coming out. I love those practice sheets, the way the artwork is done, the work that's being done around how you bring artwork and first-person accounts into your materials. I think it's just terrific. So I'll thank you for that. Take a couple questions, and we'll stay right on time. How's that? Thank you, everybody. We've got 5 minutes. Maybe we'll let our people do for a break or a second. Oh, I'm standing between people and their coffee break. Sir, tea break or no? Okay. So a question or two. I think we're doing all right, Amy? Yeah, we do have 5 minutes.
So if we do one restoration practice here, what would be some of your takeaways from your own restoration focused PSC that we might keep in mind? I know it's been a while since I could one.
Build on your successes. You've got a foundation laid because you've been talking about some of the most important pieces, which is relationships between the children, the birth family, and the birth family extended family, and foster parents. So we got all the heroes and heroines in the room being talked about now. How do you build on that to say, okay, we got a good relationship going. We don't want that child to stay in care for 2, 3, 4, 10 years necessarily. What can we do together to help address whatever major safety or other issues brought that child into care in the first place? What can we do together to get those safety issues addressed so the child can go home? So that's where I'm thinking, wow, you can set the stage for another set of brainstorming and innovating around what kind of conversations have to happen? What kinds of assessment tools need to be used? What kind of strength-based conversations need to be had? What kind of family group conferencing or family team meetings in the family's living room, or sometimes it's a safe place in a nearby church or community center or Aboriginal meeting space? Where can you hold those conversations to brainstorm how to move forward in a protective way? Or as my Subado, our inspiration for us, would say, what can you try that's never been tried before? And how can you listen to the voice of the young person, because they might have ideas that you didn't even think of until you took the time to directly ask them. Howard Bath wrote me last night. He attended the permanency, and he asked me a question about adolescents and should there be a different continuum for adolescents. And one of the things I've been thinking about that issue for a long time, but one of the issues that you might encounter would be, for some young people, they're not ready to think about adoption. They may not even be ready to think about family restoration until some of their mental health treatment needs and stability needs have been met. So this is where Subado says, if you've tried something and you've talked about something 2 years ago, try it again, because maybe you've given that person some time to grow and heal. And what you visited, I said, no, I don't want to be adopted. I don't care if it's by my aunt, I don't want to do. That was 2 years ago. They may be in a totally different space now where they'd go, under the right situation, if I could maintain contact with my mom and my dad, I'd entertain that, even though my grandma's 400 kilometers away. There's Skype, there's FaceTime. I think I could do that. So the notion of making sure our mental health and stability needs are taken care of for our young people, and then circling back to revisiting the continuum would be some of the things I think you would probably affirm and say, that's right for Australia. Families come and go, families come in and out, nearness to each other. In a country as dynamic and as large as this, what technology and relationship building tools, drawing from some of the original people here, what are some of the long lost communication and relationship tools that need to be brought back? And that you have a rich, we were just talking about how some of the language and things were prohibited. And what about some of those ideas need to be brought forward and then used again? So I think there'd be probably some great breakthroughs I think you would make. I hope that helped.
Yeah, that relatives don't adopt you, so it'd be more like a guardianship. So
Guardianship.
Was decided against at one point. I think we should revisit guardianship.
You're right, that said, hey, that you get all the legal safeguards of sorts of an adoption, right? Because the guardian can sign off on health care, school, all the daily things that a parent, that's what I like about guardianship. If I can't get a child restored home, and if adoption is just not right, then guardianship at least gives that child and their caregiver some legal protection, and that's the part I love about that. And you're right, and that may be what is culturally and from a family point of view, that may be the acceptable way to go. Yeah, so you could explore all that. I bet you guardianship is probably underused in Australia. It certainly is with us. It's climbing now because we're subsidizing it and people are talking about it, and the judges are getting trained by other judges about, this is a pretty good permanency option, you ought to consider it in certain cases, because some of them didn't know it. So All right, I think I'm at time, but one more question? Yes, oh, of course.
In this day and age, it's such a big concern that Aboriginal people right around the world from their traditional homelands are the ones that are getting taken the most. You know, in this day and age, it seems to be cruel that that's still happening in this day and age.
I agree. And being placed so far apart, how can you do family visitation if the foster home is 350 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers away from that birth family, that clan, where the child went to school, where some of their closest friends are? And I agree with you. That's where we're trying to, I don't say ban, but we're severely restricting we're trying to severely restrict out-of-state placement of youth, particularly if they go into a group home or a residential treatment center, because some of the most important safeguards are to your point, aren't as easy to implement, and it makes it very hard.
Any person, we have yarns all the time as Aboriginal people, how the different organisations or government organisations don't pull together and talk between one another. They each have their own agenda and they stick to that, but it doesn't match up and cross over with and meet everybody's needs. Because there's not.
You are spot on. That is so right. And the intervention strategy that I would say maybe to look at and adapt for Australia's purposes would be wraparound. Because wraparound, start out in Alaska, trying to bring children back to Alaska, to the native villages and the communities, and because kids were being shipped to other states for treatment. And wraparound came out of that, bringing kids home to community, and it has a values base that I think very much complements your values base here, but I think some of the practice techniques would need to be adapted for Australia. But I think, to your point, it would be a really good one.
Pretty well.
Pardon?
There's a grandmother that took on 2 of her grandchildren.
Yeah.
That's working really well. My daughter took on another one. I just find sometimes with the government organisations, when a family and a child get comfortable with one another in foster care, then they separate them because they get too familiar with one another.
Yeah, that's not right.
Know one another too well.
Yeah.
And that heartache is really big.
Then the child's angry, and the next placement doesn't go so well, and then they're angry again. You're right. Instead of saying, let's build on that.
You lose a child.
Right. I agree.
So,
Yeah. One of the principles of wraparound is getting everybody who's involved in that family's case together in a room to talk it through. That's why I thought about it, because it's trying to address that problem of everybody. The case plan is 20 pages long, and there's 6 agencies involved. And by the time the birth parent does everything on the task list, they're exhausted and they've been on buses, all week. Just because people aren't coordinating.
One where the person could take on not just the child, but the parent of the child, the mum. So took the mum and the child on as like a foster carer or a support person for both of them, and they kept the mother with the child.
Beautiful.
That was another good one that I've seen in practice.
Yeah. That's the wraparound philosophy, supports that kind of innovative, out-of-the-box thinking. And that's what I love about it. So that would be another one. So thank you, everybody. And we're going to,
I actually had a schedule, so I don't know if there's any other questions.
Oh, we can do that. Yeah, how we do? Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Sarah, keep us on. Any other questions or comments? I know I might have said, just something else came to mind. Yes?
More
Yes.
just for you to dish some goss, is there anything that you're doing in America that you think would work really, really well here? Or alternatively, is there something in America that you think just really wouldn't work here with culture differences?
Some of the most important ideas we actually came from this hemisphere. So family group conferencing, family team meetings came from here in New Zealand. So ironically, and sometimes you lose your way and you forget that, or it's hard to do, or staff members don't get the training and coaching they need. So I would encourage you to, it's the family interaction tools that are some of the best. But what we've had to train our line staff up in is things like motivational interviewing, appreciative inquiry, which I understand is a core piece of your signs of safety risk tool that was built with Aboriginal families and staff in Western Australian Perth. That technique embeds in it appreciative inquiry, but a lot of times mainstream child welfare workers never get that training.
Do you want to define that for people?
An appreciative inventory is the way you have conversations with people that you're embedding in the conversation, you're pointing out or helping them point out strengths and things that are going well in their life, in their community, in their relationships, and you're weaving that in so you're not totally focused on what's going wrong. And there's a whole clinical technology, a way of conversing with people that I find is very appreciative. Solution-based casework is another one. Actually, Andrew Turnell, who did Science of Safety, was trained as a marriage and family therapist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, my hometown, where Insoo Kim Berg, one of the co-founders of solution-focused therapy, she pioneered her work. She's sadly no longer with us, but she amazing work. So that's another example of a solution, forward-thinking, strength-based approach, because in child welfare sometimes we get so negative. We're always focusing on the risks and the safeties issues that we don't think about having a more balanced, normal conversation with people, and those are techniques that our workers need training on. Motivational interviewing comes from the substance abuse field because for anybody who's ever done substance abuse treatment, or if you have family members like I have who have battled that, whether it's drug or alcohol, there's a lot of resistance to getting help and understanding what you've got. And motivational interviewing, they did a beautiful job of helping people think about their situation and get encouraged to make a change. And how often Child Protective Services and foster care are we in the same situation? Somebody doesn't want to change their bedtime routine, or how they discipline their child, or how they view their teenager. And one of the things around motivational interviewing is it helps you have those conversations in a way. So those are some of the techniques that, frankly, are coming around the world or got invented here that we're starting to use. I mentioned yesterday in that talk from the work that Nikki Well did out of New Zealand called The Three Houses. And it's, your house of worries, house of hopes, house of worries, what's going well, and then what are your hopes and dreams? And it's a very practical sort of, you can color in, draw, diagram. That's another practical tool that people are using to open up conversations. We just can't sit there with a pen and paper and just ask a bazillion questions to people, right? We got to draw people out. We got to have tools that help us have conversations about real world, real things, and strength-based conversations too. So those are some of the things I think we're working through.
Thanks for Paul. I know that we say we're training people, and when we get someone thinking about how our cultural things work and how our families work, then they move that person on. Because they've once again, got too familiar with Aboriginal people and their ways and their practices. But that's when they're just at that right peak to actually make change.
Make a change.
And they may move them, so they can't make the change.
That shouldn't happen. We should try and retain people, There is, this is a bureaucratic strategy, and I mean that in a good way. Some agencies are starting to change their pay structure. So if someone really wants to be a really good practitioner and they get very good at it, they get a salary differential, a salary bonus to reflect and honor the fact that they want to be an expert line worker, that they want to be an expert family counselor. Instead of the incentive is, I'll go be a supervisor or a unit leader because that's where the extra salary is. Well, they're saying we should also have benefits to try and keep people paid well and encouraged. Yeah. And then the last piece I mentioned yesterday is this concept I love called cultural humility, right? Being clear that when you're walking into that community or that family, you don't know what they know, and your job is to listen and learn and figure out from them what might What do they know that could be combined with what you know professionally that could make the best difference? So that's another area I think we're learning a lot in the United States about.
We did have a group of elders that came together in our community to work with people that in different departments and schools that just came onto our country. How can we help and support them? So having groups like that is important.
That is a great example. In a part of Seattle, we had two high-rise apartment buildings, and there were all kinds of CPS reports coming out. Well, it turned out those two apartment buildings had a large number of Somali families had settled. And Joel Odimba, PhD in social work, just a wonderful man, African-American leader in that community. He said, you know, let's go out to that community and let's go find some of the Somali elders. And they learned and listened. And then they outstationed two staff right in the complex. CPS referrals just dropped way down. And that was the way he said, you know, let's go learn. And it turned out they had a gap in childcare. There are a lot of kids running around unsupervised because the moms and dads were out working. And they said, okay, we got to beef up the informal supports, and we got to beef up the access to daycare, subsidized daycare. And it wasn't quite as simple. They had to have, I think they had to bring in some other family supports, but those were some of the primary drivers. And there, they dropped those CPS referrals way down. But again, it was the whole point of you go and you learn from the people who know that community well. In this case, it was the elders who really could help them. And that was a great success for a public child welfare agency to do a job. Yes? Last question.
Oh, there's also
Yep.
one question
Oh.
here. We could
Two
take
more questions,
Two more
Steve.
questions,
Yes.
and then we're done.
Yep.
Here in South Wales, in the care and protection jurisdiction, we have something called the cultural plan. Supposedly, to start with the child when the child comes into the care and protection jurisdiction. And that is for Aboriginal kids as well as for kids from a different background, non-English speaking background. What we find, I work for the children's court, what we usually find when they get to us, we're supposed to do court-ordered assessments, there's nothing until the clinician reads through, oh, they're from Tonga, or they are Aboriginals, because there's no care plan. But that care plan is so crucial because it documents the connection of the kid to the community.
That's right. That's
all
right.
the things that you spoke about, do you have that in your...
Our protection federal law is called the Indian Child Welfare Act. It's not perfect. It's not implemented as well, but the safeguard is workers are supposed to take the time to inquire about the child's racial ethnic background. And if the child is a member of an Indian nation, they're supposed to go find and touch base with that child's tribe. And the tribe has the opportunity to exercise jurisdiction and say, we will take on this situation. But at the very least, you better consult with us before you finalize your case plan. And that is imperfectly implemented, but that's one way we have in federal law because too many of our American Indian children are being placed. So, yeah. So what you mentioned, a cultural plan and paying attention to culture and doing the right kind of careful assessment is a really important piece of it. So thank you for mentioning that. Courts can be a great enforcer of that if the judges know or the magistrates know what to ask for. Thank you. And I think, Steve, you have the last question.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. You're talking about local solutions and place-based local solutions, which is great. One of the tensions one can have, though, is that, if you do everything, and absolutely that's fantastic, and I think at Burke and work that was done with the local area police commander and the community around domestic and family violence a number of years ago, and it was a really strong local solution. But one of the challenges we have is that's a community of 3,000 people. New South Wales is a big state, and so that issue of if we want to bring about system change, land it in various communities, that's an issue which will mean the work it takes for a local solution, which you have to commit to. But then on the other hand, having a look at things that will have an application more broadly across the system.
I agree.
Perhaps across the whole district, or perhaps across the whole state. Now that's a really unfair, I don't know if it's even a question, but can you, what's your observation on that? Because my worry is I'm going to be very, very old before we actually impact on a large number of communities around fundamental system changes.
That's your tension. I think that is the tension, and I know you have legal training. That's the issue, is how do you have a certain floor or core set of laws and policies that act as the foundation. So states can't just go off willy-nilly and do something that really is going to harm children. So there's the tensions between that and customized community-based services. Now, I heard for a while that England had one of the best approaches. They had a lot of local social service offices. They were neighborhood-based community ones, like I started up in Milwaukee. Very more, that had that flavor. They know the families, they know the neighborhood. For me, it's balancing those two things. The ability to innovate locally and have enough flexibility to have a services mix that makes sense for that neighborhood or community, and yet have a certain floor of laws and policies and budgetary allocations that say, you know, there's a core set of things that has to happen in every place. And we don't have that. I don't think we've got that right, most of us, but you've named it. It's a tension that we have to work through. Yeah, you've named it. And with that, thank you.
Yes, thank you again, Peter.